So, all right, I have some terrific news to share. Are you ready? Okay. Ready? Okay. So, there is no more hate speech and no more racism. It's done. We've eliminated it. It's all gone. Yep, that's right. All of it. Maybe that's just wishful thinking. Okay. So, a little bit of context. So, the other day, I had posted on Twitter the following thing. So I wrote, you can use your freedom of speech however you want, but if you're using it to make hateful, racist comments, it seems like a bit of a waste. It seems like such a waste of wonderful, precious freedom. That's what I wrote. And the reason that I wrote it was because, well, that same day I was basically people sent me a bunch of DMs and also just replies with blatant anti-Semitism. Always fun to receive. I, luckily I actually have pretty thick skin about that kind of stuff because my attitude is very much like that has nothing to do with me. That's just a you problem. It's kind of idiotic to me that people feel that way about somebody's race, that they they spend their time, hating or discriminating against somebody because of the color of their skin or because of their ethnicity. Um, so it's a bit sad, I find, because you know it's just sad to me that some people are like that, but that has nothing to do with me. That has everything to do with them. So I encounter this stuff, and while sometimes it makes me sad to see so much of it, I do have a lot of resiliency when it comes to that stuff. Not everyone does, but I'm fortunate that I do, even though occasionally uh, it does get to me, and I did find it frustrating because earlier that day I had posted a speech. Uh, about somebody who is fighting for freedom of speech and had Nazis, literal Nazis, apply for, or neo Nazis, I guess, apply for a license, to do a parade in this guy's town, and the mayor was Jewish, and it was kind of a challenge to him, and ultimately it decided that freedom of speech was such a fundamental important right that to have fought for, that even you know you have to tolerate that kind of speech ultimately, and that's the price that you pay for freedom. So it was kind of ironic that, having just posted something like that, that's the kind of speech I'd be confronted with. And I thought, well, these people can say anything, and this is what they choose to say. But okay, I guess that's the price of freedom, but I do wish that use their freedom a little bit more wisely. So that's why I posted what I posted, and that's what it was about. But my post was met with a lot of skepticism. Why? Because a lot of people, had either said that, well, they haven't seen anything racist in quite a long time, because racism doesn't exist anymore, or is widely exaggerated. And and then the other thing, and it's really the bigger point, is that um a lot of people have sort of indicated that anything these days is labeled as hate speech or racism, and these are basically false accusations. Anything somebody says is racism these days. People keep getting called Nazis and bigots and homophobic and transphobic, and essentially in a world where anyone can be a Nazi, no one's a Nazi, essentially. And then the other thing that would happen is, like, everyone, or a lot, not everyone, but a lot of people demanded in a polite manner that I show them evidence, essentially, of these transgressions against me, so that so that they can judge for themselves, because I guess I'm not capable of judging for for them. What are my standards for hateful comments or racism? Maybe I'm defining it wrong, essentially. Maybe it doesn't quite align with their own definitions of it. And, you know, they have a point in a sense, right? Hate speech is difficult to define. This is why there is such a thing. We don't, under the First Amendment in the US, hate speech is also protected speech, right? You can't really define hate speech because it is subjective. People are going to have all sorts of definitions, right? And the only kind of speech that's not protected is going to be the kind of speech that is going to incite violence. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that, if you're a reasonable human being, that you're not going to be able to kind of define pretty quickly that, certain things just don't fly and certain things really do cross the threshold of being fairly labeled as hate speech. And it did bother me maybe more than it should have bothered me, but in a sense, I felt kind of gaslit, and I felt like I was being asked to provide evidence as if I was on trial somehow. And, and I really didn't want to do that. And I didn't want to do that, one, because I felt like I have always acted in good faith. I've never, called people Nazis or racists without, I've always applied the words accurately. I've always taken the words seriously. I mean, I've written a series on word misappropriation, so it felt unfair to now be put into a position as if I had participated in this kind of unfair game of verbal misappropriation. And, as somebody who's never really made these kinds of accusations without merit, and in fact stood out against that kind of thing. And then the other part of it is like, well, I don't want to give attention to these messages that were sent to me or posted. I don't want to give the satisfaction to the people who sent them my way. I don't want them to see them. I don't to be seen as sharing them. I don't want them to feel like they got my attention in the way that they did. So there's two things going on. And then on top of it was like, well, in back in 2021, I had my own experience of being sort of falsely accused of I think I was called like a white supremacist over basically defending someone for merely posting a job opportunity at a conservative network, Fox. And so the words were completely misused on me. And at the time, I had written an op-ed basically warning people about how these words would eventually, if we keep doing that and just using them in this way, they would eventually be divorced from their true meaning. And then we will not be able to meaningfully identify instances of actual racism, of actual white supremacy, whatever that means, and meaningfully address instances when this happens, when this occurs in our society. And ironically, here I am, unable to address them. But I also found it frustrating because it's like, well, just because some people misuse it, or maybe even a lot of people, I'll grant you that. There's certainly a lot of this going on. I'm not going to gaslight the people saying that this is going on. It absolutely is. But just because it is doesn't mean that we now have to blanket, say, well, now everything, if everything is racism, nothing is racism. No, we have to continue looking at individual instances. And that's what I find so enormously frustrating because we have to continue fighting for the integrity of words, and words matter, and we should take them seriously. Just because some people don't take them seriously doesn't mean we should be giving up on them. Watch that BBC interview, and Elon turned the tables on that interviewer who said there was an increase in his timeline and increase of hate in his timeline, and then he couldn't give a single example. And people said, well, he couldn't give a single example, therefore there must be no increase of hate on Twitter. Well, that reporter was really terrible at answering that question. He maybe doesn't know of any examples legitimately because maybe he didn't see it. Maybe he just couldn't think of an example. Maybe, well, he clearly didn't do very good research or preparation, and he wasn't prepared for the question. He did a terrible job answering that question. That doesn't mean there's no increase in hateful kind of speech on the platform. I have heard from many people that's the case for them. I've experienced it. And, those are anecdotal experiences. I had somebody send me a study that actually does seem to indicate that there is anti-Semitic content, for example, that has been on the rise. But there's also anti-Semitism on the rise. So that's maybe part of it. And when you're creating a free speech platform, which, Twitter isn't 100% that, but it is freer, you're going to attract people who want to practice their free speech. And not all of that free speech is going to be just, stronger opinions about, I don't know. I guess the thing that keeps getting brought up is what is a woman? But it's also going to be blatantly racist content. It's going to be genuinely people who do think that other races are subpar. It's going to be those people too. It's just natural. That doesn't mean that we're going to have to support censorship, but you have to kind of acknowledge that that also exists. And okay, so how do we deal with that better? Well, first of all, we have to recognize that it exists, and then we talk about, how do we deal with it? Community notes perhaps is a good start. Addressing it when it happens is a good start. I don't know. But anyways, I think you get the point. Just because, there is people are falsely accused all the time of things doesn't mean that those things no longer exist. Doesn't mean that racism has been erased. And just because people are victims of false accusations, it doesn't mean that you should just dismiss people's valid experiences. It's like if somebody says, I was assaulted today. And well, we know there are people who make up accusations of assault. But assault still happens, right? So I think we need to approach this with a little bit more nuance. Oh, I use that word way too much, I know. But we need to take things, I think, individual on a case-by-case basis, and also consider the source, right? Like, this isn't coming from, if it's coming from somebody who's constantly crying wolf, okay, I can understand skepticism. But if it's coming from someone who's pretty forthright, maybe give a little bit of benefit of doubt, give a little bit of, faith. And let's have a conversation. Anyways, those are my more than 2 cents, because I can't seem to keep it to 2 cents. Bandwidth is expensive, so I need to make good use of it. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, and please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and helps me bring new content to you, whether it's interviews or these random thoughts. Talk to you soon.